faithfully delivering value and interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, we're interpreting the book My Life Slightly Smaller Than Modern American History for you. The subtitle is Katharine Graham's Autobiography, detailing frequent political scandals in late 20th century America. In 1971, the famous Pentagon Papers leak happened, followed by the globally shocking Watergate Scandal. And behind these scandals, we see a legendary woman, the book's author, Katharine Graham. She was once the helm of the Washington Post, known as the First Lady of American journalism. She interacted with multiple U.S. presidents. George W. Bush said, "Presidents come and go, but she knew everything about them." Katharine was born into wealth. After marriage, she stayed home to care for her family, but after 23 years as a homemaker, she faced a marital crisis. Her husband suffered depression, had an affair, and ultimately shot himself. Katharine had to return to work and began managing the family newspaper. Under her leadership, the Washington Post exposed the Pentagon Papers and Watergate Scandal, making her famous and giving the paper international prestige. Many consider it the most prestigious newspaper in America after the New York Times. In 1997, at age 80, Katharine wrote this autobiography. She told her growth story, especially as a woman in a male-dominated world, and how her choices influenced history's course. Katharine titled the book Personal History. The Chinese translation published in 2018 is named My Life, Slightly Smaller Than Modern American History. And because she was born in 1917 and died in 2001, her life was slightly shorter than 20th century American history, which explains the book's title. And then her autobiography adds vivid historical details to many events in modern American history, with beautiful writing and a realistic style. The book was published, and the next year, it won the Pulitzer Prize, becoming one of Fortune magazine's 75 must-read books. So, how did Katharine embark on her journalism path? In a male-dominated world, how did she step-by-step become the Post's helm and propel it to its peak? Now, let's go back to Katharine's childhood. In 1917, Katharine was born into a wealthy Jewish family in New York. Her father, Eugene Meyer, was born into prominence. At 32, he became a famous investor on Wall Street, with millions in assets thanks to his investing skills. Mother Agnes Ernst loved art and literature and was a woman full of personality. In early 20th century America, educated women either became teachers or took clerical jobs, but Ernst became a journalist. This was a remarkable feat at the time. In 1910, father at 34 and mother at 23 got married. They had 5 children, with Katharine as the 4th. The older siblings were rebellious, but Katharine was obedient, shy, and lacked confidence, largely due to her mother. At the start of marriage, mother resented the sudden responsibilities, feeling that raising kids erased her individuality. To cope, she traveled to ease anxiety and pain. The parent separation affected the children. The oldest sister once tried to elope with her boyfriend. The second sister stole mother's necklace and went traveling. The brothers secretly learned to fly planes. They had no interest in their parents' work. But by the time Katharine was born, mother's emotions had stabilized. Katharine experienced a full family life from childhood and saw her siblings overly monitored for their rebellion. She discovered that obedience brought more freedom. On the other hand, mother's arrogant and strong-willed personality made Katharine lack confidence from a young age. She recalled that as a kid, reading The Three Musketeers, mother told her she couldn't appreciate it unless she read it in French, like her. This made Katharine lose interest in reading for a while. When Katharine was 12 or 13, she brought a friend home for her first sleepover. She was super excited and kept asking mother how to host her friend. Now, all that better was how to... But mother thought it was silly to ask such a question, with a pool, tennis court, and bowling alley at home. So she scolded Katharine harshly. Mother always made Katharine feel like she never did anything right. She often asked herself, is what I'm saying appropriate? Are my clothes proper? Am I charming? This childhood lack of confidence and obedience to authority affected her long into adulthood. During middle school, Katharine joined the school magazine and got interested in journalism. And during this time, in June 1933, her father, Meyer, bought the Washington Post, founded in 1877 as DC's first morning paper, but with limited reach elsewhere in America. When Meyer bought it, the Post was in terrible shape and at risk of bankruptcy.
But for Meyer, running a newspaper was something he'd long planned.
Meyer always cared deeply about public life and the common good. He believed a great nation must have a great newspaper to help people understand the truth. He trusted that if a newspaper reported facts impartially, people could rely on it to do the right thing. Meyer soon felt the pressure. When he took over, the paper was near bankruptcy. Reduced pages, massive brain drain, dismal circulation, and ad revenue. In 1935 alone, he lost $1.3 million. But Meyer persevered, recruiting talent everywhere, laying the foundation for the paper's future success. Father Meyer was awkward with children, so Katharine wasn't close to him growing up, but their shared passion for newspapers became a connection. The bond between father and daughter. After high school, Katharine worked part-time at the Post as a copier in the women's section, handling reader mail. In 1935, Katharine entered the University of Chicago to study history and became a campus reporter. She read the Post daily and often exchanged views on the paper with her father through letters. She told her father Chicagoans were all talking about a comic strip.
Hearing this, her father discovered the comic rights were available, bought it, and its serialization became hugely successful.
Every paper improvement thrilled Meyer. He'd update Katharine as if certain she'd become a journalist. He urged Katharine to join the Post soon, writing, "The Post is so small. You should do the work to push it to the top." In June 1938, after college, her father got her a reporter job at the San Francisco News to practice news writing. In 1939, answering her father's call, Katharine returned to Washington to work on the Post's editorial page. She was the youngest reporter on the editorial page. After work, Katharine befriended young professionals from various fields, debating the New Deal, Nazism, and civil rights. At these discussions, Katharine met her future husband, Phil Graham. Born in 1915 to a poor family, unlike hers, he'd graduated from Harvard Law and clerked at the U.S. Supreme Court. According to Katharine, Phil was smart, hardworking, exceptionally handsome, and charming. In June 1940, they married after a whirlwind romance. After his court term ended, Phil worked in government, then the military, and later went to the Pacific Theater. In early 1946, Phil ended his service, returned to the U.S., and joined the Washington Post as publisher at his father-in-law's invitation. The publisher represents a newspaper's economic interests externally, which could be held by the president or someone appointed by the board. 2 years later, in 1948, Katharine's father decided to give the Post's management to Phil instead of Katharine. In that era, the only possible successor was male. Katharine's brother pursued medicine, so she wasn't upset. She was thrilled. Influenced by the times, Katharine believed women were intellectually inferior to men and only suited for family and childcare. Men had an advantage in management and business work. Phil likened the Post he took over to a leaking ship, no longer near bankruptcy but still losing money. After he took over, Katharine assisted him, scouting talent, attending social events, networking to expand the Post's influence. Under Phil, the Post formed the Washington Post Company, acquired the Times-Herald, capturing 70% of DC's morning paper market. Then they entered TV broadcasting, and in 1961 acquired Newsweek magazine, solidifying the company's foundation. As the Post thrived, Phil gained political influence as a Democrat supporter. While maintaining the Post's editorial independence, he befriended John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson, even helping Johnson's presidential campaign. After Johnson's loss, he helped broker Johnson as Kennedy's running mate. Presidents spoke highly of Phil. Kennedy said he was charismatic and witty. Katharine often attended White House dinners with her husband, befriending many in Kennedy's administration. After marriage, Katharine had 4 children, but life wasn't as sweet as it seemed. Although Phil encouraged his wife to keep working and socializing, at home, he often made jokes about Katharine, mocking her fashion sense and figure.
Due to Catherine's weight gain, Phil called her fatty and even gave her a pig head-shaped tin, hanging it in the hallway, thinking it was funny.
And when Katharine was talking with friends, Phil's eyes often showed disgust. Even in reading matters, Phil was as arrogant as Katharine's mother. Katharine was exposed to the works of American historian and novelist Henry Adams earlier than Phil, and she read more of them.
But Phil condescendingly said that she didn't understand the concepts at all because she hadn't marked the most important parts in the book.
Thus, Katharine became less confident and lost her own opinions.
When speaking in public, she would get nervous and anxious. She didn't like attending social events and often doubted if her decisions were right.
For example, during a move, Katharine found a house she liked, but worried that her husband would think it was too expensive and unsatisfied. She invited him to see it, nervously.
Phil blurted out after seeing the house, "Are you crazy?"
Katharine then muttered nervously, "Let's see inside first. It might not be as bad as it looks." In Katharine's words, she felt like a second-class citizen, but had grown accustomed to it. Once, Katharine's mother gave her a pair of beautiful gemstone earrings. Since her mother didn't like to show emotions, this gesture meant a lot to Katharine. But Phil said, "You don't wear long earrings. Our daughter likes them, so give them to her." This made Katharine hold a grudge. She really wanted to keep them herself, but lacked the courage to object. Following Phil's suggestion, she gave the earrings to her daughter and then cried alone. She said, "For me, losing the earrings meant losing everything. I felt utterly degraded." Additionally, Phil developed bipolar disorder in 1957, making communication between them difficult, which cast a shadow over their marriage. Katharine guessed that becoming the son-in-law of the Post brought immense pressure to Phil, because when Phil talked with friends, he mentioned that, he often fell into self-doubt. He wondered if he could have achieved his current status without marrying Katharine and accepting the Post's shares, but a bigger blow was yet to come. On Christmas Eve 1962, Katharine accidentally discovered that her husband had been cheating for a long time with more than one affair, and she felt confused and heartbroken. Then, in August 1963, Phil, whose bipolar disorder had worsened, shot himself at home. So far, we've learned about Katharine's first half of life. She loved journalism, but had to give up work for family and children. She deeply loved her husband, yet became deeply insecure through their relationship. Due to her husband's death, 46-year-old Katharine began her Post-career, opening the most important chapter of her life. Now let's discuss Katharine's experience at the Post, how she transformed from an insecure woman to a competent publisher, becoming the anchor during the Pentagon Papers leak and Watergate. After Phil's death, Katharine suffered tremendously. After the funeral, she traveled to Europe, which distracted her but forced her to face the question of what to do next. A close friend asked Katharine, "You won't work, right? You're still young and charming. You'll surely remarry." Katharine understood her friend's concern. Marriage was seen as the most viable path for women then, but she firmly said she'd return to the Post. Katharine first considered running the Post when Phil asked for divorce. She nearly gave it up, feeling incapable, but a friend encouraged her. "You have all the necessary talent to run this paper well." And typer. And you've been diminished by those around you for too long. You have no idea of your own strength. On September 20th, 1963, after returning from her trip, Katharine was formally elected company president. Earlier, when her father gave management to Phil, Katharine and Phil together received 5,000 voting shares from their parents. with Phil holding the majority. After his death, Katharine inherited Phil's shares, becoming the company's largest shareholder. The Post and its other newspapers and TV stations now had rapid revenue growth and significant public influence, but faced worsening labor conflicts and concerning profit margins. Katharine was now 46, hadn't worked formally for a decade, knew little about the Post's internal operations, and lacked her father and husband's energy and knowledge. Oh, oh. So she saw her role at the Post merely as a silent partner, observing operations until her children could take over. Because of this, Katharine often felt anxious. She wrote to a friend, "My legs in my boots wouldn't stop shaking, but I tried hard to hide it." During this time, many family and friends gave her tremendous support. Her daughter wrote to encourage her, "No one has Dad's talent and imagination." Wow, yum. Dad, but you can excel in your own way. You have excellent judgment, exceptional ability to interact with people, earn respect, recognize talent, delegate wisely, and the willingness to persevere. Katharine became the true helm of the Post. The process was difficult and lonely. She faced challenges in both perception and management. First, perception. Upon taking office, Katharine faced workplace discrimination against women. At work, Katharine was often the only woman. She was frequently asked, "Are you sure you want to attend this all-male city luncheon?" In the upper echelons of the newspaper industry, she found no peers to discuss issues with. Because of this, she initially clashed with John Sweeterman, the Post's financial steward, and Gong Chen. John was unaccustomed to communicating with women at work, especially those he deemed uninformed. When newly appointed Katharine persistently questioned him, he'd fly into rages. Such conflicts made Katharine cry multiple times. Katharine's solution was to regularly attend editorial meetings and Post luncheons, and travel with various editors and reporters. This greatly helped her understand journalism and political jargon. Gradually, she and John began respecting each other. She even asked him, "What's the most important quality for a newspaper operator?" John replied, "Good judgment. Don't worry about your lack of experience." Now to Katharine's management challenges at the newspaper. Back then, Post executives' performance had declined significantly. The news department became lax, with many employees skipping work. Someone told Katharine, "You could swing a dead cat in the newsroom and not hit anyone. Barely anyone shows up." Katharine began seeking new talent. During this restructuring, her most crucial move was poaching from Newsweek. Ben Bradley, then 43, who had newspaper experience and rich insights. He later became Newsweek's Washington bureau chief. Katharine invited him to lunch and asked about his long-term plans. He replied, "Since you asked, I'd like to dedicate the rest of my life to being the Post's executive editor." In 1965, Bradley became the Post's executive editor. With Katharine's support, Bradley hired prominent journalists, adding about 50 new positions. The editorial department regained vitality, and Katharine's efforts earned recognition from company staff, including veteran John. By 1968, when John retired, he firmly supported Katharine becoming the company's publisher. Gradually, the nervous Katharine who trembled during public speeches vanished. Instead, her work scope broadened significantly. She represented the Post at events, confidently handling pressure from both government and readers. For instance, the Vietnam War began in 1955, and the U.S. directly joined in 1965. Initially, most Americans supported the Vietnam War, including the Post, but as U.S. casualties mounted, some reconsidered. The Post gradually shifted stance, publishing anti-war editorials, which drew reader protests, accusing it of subversive influence. Katharine wrote them specifically. She simply believes the policy of expanding the war has failed. In reaching independent conclusions, the Post wasn't swayed by government or public pressure. Valuing reporting independence defined Katharine's newspaper philosophy. As early as sycophancy, when Roosevelt became president, the Post called him the King on its front page, prompting Katharine to criticize her father for presidential flattery. Oh, no. To Katharine, Newspapers must remain objective and independent, meaning reporting answers only to factual truth, must stay independent from subjects, and never serve specific interest groups. A good newspaper shouldn't pander to any faction.
If facts are accurate and serve public interest, no one, not even the president or herself, can interfere with reporters' work.
Lyndon Johnson, the 36th U.S. president, clashed with Katharine over the Post's independent coverage. Previously, through Phil, the families socialized often. After Phil's death, contact dwindled. In 1964, while campaigning, Johnson suddenly showered Katharine with attention. During one trip, amid accompanying media moguls, he invited Katharine onto his private jet, then vacationed with her on a speedboat. Because by this time, the Post's status was growing daily. Advertising topped Washington, and daily circulation exceeded 400,000 copies. Katharine stated that privately she still supported Johnson, but the Post must adhere to neutrality, which clearly hurt Johnson. After Johnson's election, he wanted to appoint a police chief in Washington, the only place he could intervene in personnel. Unexpectedly, D.C.'s administrator appointed another chief, and the Post immediately exposed it, making presidential intervention nearly impossible. Johnson believed this was Katharine manipulating the paper or allowing staff to oppose his interests. When he saw the paper, Katharine happened to be at the White House attending the president's 30th wedding anniversary party.
Furious, Johnson called Katharine into a room and shouted curses.
Though terrifying Katharine, it didn't change her newspaper principles. Later, on Vietnam War coverage, the Post's reports infuriated Johnson. He felt Katharine deliberately embarrassed him, believing the Post misunderstood and biased against him. And by 1968, when Nixon became president, Katharine faced greater pressure. First, in 1969, anti-Vietnam War sentiment surged, with massive protests in Washington. When asked his thoughts, Nixon said he'd been watching football. The Post compared his response to "let them eat cake." The Nixon administration took special notice, accusing the Washington Post Company of monopolistic tendencies, all obeying the same master.
Katharine, this was a serious accusation, threatening the Post's TV licenses, impacting finances. Yet conflicts with two presidents didn't alter her independent stance.
This became even clearer during the Pentagon Papers leak and Watergate. In both cases, Katharine's unconditional support secured the Washington Post's glory. The Pentagon Papers leak occurred on June 13, 1971. By then, U.S. involvement in Vietnam had lasted a decade. The New York Times exclusively revealed classified documents about U.S. Vietnam policy. These files came from the Pentagon, U.S. Defense Department headquarters, hence the name Pentagon Papers. After the documents were published, they sparked huge attention. The government then banned the Times from further publication, but the Times refused, leading to a government lawsuit. On June 16th, the Post obtained over 4,400 pages of the Pentagon Papers. The Post hesitated about immediate publication. They were seeking a public listing. If charged like the Times, it could derail their IPO.
Executive editor Ben Bradley received threatening calls from the Justice Department, warning he'd face Espionage Act charges if leaking the documents.
The Post was torn. Editors and reporters insisted on publishing to defend press freedom and independence, while lawyers urged delay, fearing legal risks could destroy the paper. The dilemma landed on Katharine's shoulders. On the afternoon of June 17th, during a party, her lawyer suddenly called demanding a decision. The world knew the Post had the documents. All eyes were on her. Katharine didn't detail her internal struggle in her book, only describing panic on the call. Taking a deep breath, she said, "Go, go, go! Let's do it!" On June 18th, parts of the Pentagon Papers ran in the Post. The government quickly sued, sending the case to the Supreme Court.
On June 30th, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that the government failed to prove disclosure endangered national security. Both papers won. The Post successfully went public that same year.
Katharine felt the win was bittersweet. the court hadn't firmly reaffirmed the First Amendment, press freedom as inviolable. The Pentagon Papers elevated the Post but strained relations with Nixon, escalating into fiercer conflict during Watergate. Watergate began early on June 17, 1972. Katharine learned 5 men in rubber gloves had broken into Democratic HQ the night before to plant bugs and were caught. And the next day, the Post prominently covered this bizarre burglary. The White House press secretary called it a third-rate burglary attempt, warning some were exaggerating its significance. The Democratic Party headquarters building had a small man-made waterfall at its entrance, so the complex was named Watergate. The burglary here and subsequent related events became collectively known as the Watergate Scandal. NetDoc, police found the burglars carried sequentially numbered $100 bills, document-filled boxes, a White House phone directory, and surveillance equipment. And 2 Post reporters keenly noticed one burglar had made multiple calls to the president's re-election committee. More importantly, during the burglary, 2 former White House aides were directing operations from a hotel across from Watergate. On August 1st, the Post reported the connection between these 5 burglars and the president's re-election committee. Nixon publicly claimed White House non-involvement, but events turned against him. As the investigation deepened, the Post discovered the campaign committee not only planted bugs, but established a secret fund controlled by 5 individuals to gather Democratic intelligence. Among them were the current campaign director and the president's chief of staff. This directly linked Watergate to the White House and Nixon. The White House accused the Post of false reporting and espionage. A senator publicly denounced the Post's coverage as the most notorious political scandal of the campaign. Many readers demanded the Post shut down, accusing it of unpatriotic behavior. Once, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger angrily asked Katharine, "What's the matter with your reporting? Don't you believe Nixon will win re-election?" Kissinger was subtly warning that Nixon would retaliate post-election. Under immense pressure, the Post endured an isolated period. Katharine grew anxious when most newspapers didn't follow the story, even doubting its value. Why isn't anyone else reporting this? The Post's investigation infuriated Nixon's administration. Campaign Director Mitchell crudely threatened,
The Post's investigation is bullshit! If they publish, Katharine's tits will get caught in a meat grinder!
White House staff frequently discussed targeting Katharine. Friends warned her not to act alone and to strictly uphold journalistic standards. If the reporting was wrong, the consequences would be disastrous. Caught in the whirlpool, Katharine's only recourse was to encourage staff to investigate independently, gather evidence, and report truth with absolute accuracy. Editors established rigorous verification methods. Anonymous sources required at least one corroborating source. Whenever possible, any story needed triple source confirmation. Before printing, every word of each report had to be reviewed by at least one senior editor. Before publication, the chief editor personally vetted and approved each piece. After Nixon's re-election in late 1972, he indeed targeted the Post. He fired officials who secretly supported the Post, banned it from White House events, barred officials from granting interviews, and directed wealthy allies to buy the paper. And worse for Katharine, the government threatened not to renew the Post's TV station licenses. The company's stock plummeted, halving its market value quickly. Katharine decided to meet Woodward and Bernstein, the reporters who first covered Watergate. This was their first meeting after 7 months of reporting. She anxiously asked, "Will the truth come out?" Neither reporter could guarantee it. Still, Katharine never pressured them or interfered. Throughout Watergate, an informant code named Deep Throat provided clues to reporters. Katharine never demanded his identity. Instead, she told staff, "We're in too deep to turn back now." In March 1973, the Post reported, Nixon's personal lawyer used funds to silence jailed conspirators, demanding perjury and silence. Executive editor Ben Bradley later recalled, this was the case's first true turning point. because evidence now supported the Post's reporting. More media then joined, flocking to search for clues. The Post was no longer alone. 5 months later, White House tapes were exposed, revealing the truth. With Nixon's knowledge, campaign advisors bugged Watergate to spy on Democrats. Throughout the whole affair, Nixon repeatedly overstepped his authority to cover up the truth, suppress the media, and ultimately resigned under impeachment, becoming the first U.S. president to step down midterm due to scandal.
Right.
By reporting on Watergate, the Post won the Pulitzer Prize, becoming a globally renowned media outlet. Katharine also earned high praise, and even Henry Kissinger, Nixon's Secretary of State, became her lifelong friend.
He once praised Katharine, saying her legacy symbolizes wisdom, courage, and a high-quality life, and that she's irreplaceable. In her book, Katharine reflected on the whole event, saying it was a game of either I go to jail or they go to jail.
Back then, she was filled with fear and worried sick about the company's future, but look, ended up siding with the Post.
She humbly summed it up, saying, "Folks often think I showed great courage because I backed the editors during Watergate. And the truth is, I always felt I had no choice at all. Courage only counts when you've got options."
In Watergate, there was never a big decision moment where I or anyone else could suggest stopping the reporting.
After Nixon stepped down, Vice President Ford took over as president. Around then, a bunch of T-shirts popped up in the U.S. with Ford's face and text saying, "I got this job thanks to the Washington Post." Katharine's support for independent reporting also won her the staff's respect. Woodward, one of the reporters who first covered Watergate, sent her a gift. It was the old-fashioned clothes wringer that Mitchell, the campaign director, used to insult her by saying it'd wring her nipples, and it had signatures from 6 people involved in the Acoma. And sometimes the column people, for 20 years after that, it sat in Katharine's office because it perfectly captured the pressure she faced during Watergate. And after Watergate, Katharine poured energy into growing the company, buying up small newspapers and TV stations, and launching new publications. Plus, influenced by the rising feminist movement, Katharine slowly changed her views on women. She used to feel inferior to her male co-workers and thought it was a man's world.
But now, she believes women have the right to choose their own lifestyles and works to boost society's focus on women.
The Post established an all-female committee focused on women's rights issues. They could make requests to Katharine and Ben Bradley based on their suggestions. And the Post thus mandated avoiding unconsciously biased terms like divorced woman, blonde, or housewife in news coverage. Katharine also appointed a new personnel director, providing more job opportunities for women. In January 1979, Katharine passed the publisher title to her son Donald Graham, who'd served in the military, worked as a police officer, and trained across Post departments. Katharine believed he was the best successor for the Post. By 1993, Katharine had fully transferred the company to her son. By then, the Washington Post Company had grown into a massive media conglomerate. Newspapers, magazines, TV stations, cable TV, and educational services, with $1.04 in revenue. Yet, 30 years earlier, when Katharine took over, the Post's revenue was just $8.04. During her 30-year leadership, American society transformed dramatically. The feminist movement rose and civil rights advocacy expanded its influence. Katharine and her Post consistently reported America's truths, just as during Watergate. Through this, she transformed herself too. She championed women's right to choose lifestyles, actively opposed racial discrimination, and influenced American society. In July 2001, Katharine passed away at 84. Then President Bush eulogized her life with high praise. She was a true leader, a true lady, a legend.
The Post's obituary noted their favorite gift from Katharine during major news events was absolute independence.
As her father declared in a May 5, 1935 speech. A newspaper's first duty is reporting truth verified as fact, answering to readers and public, avoiding special interests, and sacrificing for public good.
Katharine upheld her father's vision and devoted herself to it.
She wrote in her book, "I'm not a fierce fighter, I hate conflict. But when there's no choice, I can fight." Well, my life, slightly smaller than modern American history. That concludes our interpretation of this book. Reading notes are below the audio. See you next time.